Hello, everyone. This is Tommy at World at War Comics. Thanks for joining us today. We have another amazing guest. Today, we have Tyler Wentland of Alterna Comics. He is the writer, creator of Red Koi, King Swan, and a bunch of short stories. I think you're going to really enjoy this one. Not only is he the writer, creator, he also is the artist. Which is a unique balance when you're writing your own comic book. And we had a great conversation about this. So I hope you enjoy. But before we get into it, if you could give us a like and a subscribe, that really helps out the channel, helps us grow, and helps us bring content like this to you. All right, everyone, enjoy. Have a great one.
Well, hello, Mr. Tyler. Thanks for joining the show. It's great to have you. How are you?
Great. How are you?
I'm hanging in there, my friend. I appreciate being connected with you and can't wait to get into Red Koi and all the other things that you're doing. But for those of you listening, if you don't know Tyler Wentland, he is the writer creator of Red Koi for Alterna Comics. And I'm sure there's a lot of other things that hopefully we'll be able to dig into. But we're really happy to have you. Really appreciate it.
I appreciate the chance to be here. Looking
Right
forward to
on,
it.
man. So let's just jump right into Red Koi. We'll start there. But man, it's I got issue one. So I got turned on to Alterna Comics about a year, maybe not even a year ago. Believe it or not, I love comics, and for whatever reason, my local comic book store didn't carry anything Alterna.
Yeah.
And then I started following Peter on Twitter, and man, I went to the website and I'm like, they had this deal. I think you purchase, I think it was $25 or $30, and you get a bunch of number ones to
Yep.
kind of like enter into the world of Alterna.
Yep.
And here this popped up. So I literally have them in alphabetical order in a box, and I got a bunch, and I've been going through them. So I eventually would have got to you anyways.
Awesome.
But yeah, and I ended up doing Wes because of Unit 44, and I was talking to
Hmm.
someone else who did a kind of a funny comic book, a humorous comic book. They're like, "Hey, you
Yep.
got to check out Unit 44," which I had in the box too.
Yeah.
Reached out to him, and then I got connected to you. So eventually, I would have got to you anyways. But man, I'm really impressed with Alterna and the comics that they produce. The writing and everything I've read is top notch. I love that old school feel. And man, where do you buy comics that are $1.50 and $1.99 anymore? That's just very impressive. I heard there might be a price hike to like 225, and I'm just like, that's still half the price of anything, less
I
than half
know.
the price
Twist
of
my
it.
arm, right?
Yeah, exactly. So let's start from the beginning. Where did Red Koi come from? When did this thought of this comic come to you?
Yeah. So Red Koi was sort of at the end of a period of maybe a few years where I had started working a day job, just a decently supporting work. But I kept thinking in my head, I've wanted to make comics ever since I was a kid. I've always drawn. I've always, I was always like best artist in class or something like that. But I realized, my stuff's not as good as what's on the shelves. And if I want a shot, I need to aim for that and see how close I can get.
Yeah.
So I took about a year and I put myself through what I called my own art school. And it was like, okay, I want to learn to tell stories. I want to learn to draw different people, places, things. How do I combine this? So it was like, okay, I'll work on short stories in
Mhm.
different settings. So it's like two old men playing chess in a city park, great. Then I had one, it was like a Maasai warrior, on the plains hunting a lion.
Yeah.
Another scene, one was, you know, uh, some gangsters in the city, something like that.
Yeah.
So it was like doing all this until it came to the point where I was like, okay, I think my stuff's up to par. I won an art contest for Valiant Comics, had a
Mm,
piece of artwork published in one of their books.
nice.
And then I was like, well, I want to write and draw something. So I was like, I looked up what's the best way to get published when you're starting out, and it was anthologies. And
Yeah.
so I just, did the great research of Googling comic anthologies, and I came
Yep.
across Alterna. At the time, Pete was doing these graphic novels full of short stories, but there was a contiguous theme
Mm,
throughout them. So the one that I saw was superpowers. And I
mm,
didn't really want to tell a superhero story because maybe, in a similar way to you, I love superheroes growing up. But it's like, to me, the superheroes were already made.
yeah. Yeah.
And so I was like, I and I know that there are new ways to do them, but it was like I just didn't see the way to do it in a short story. So what I sort of cheated, and I did a retelling of Hercules' first trial against the Nemean lion.
Nice.
And so it got picked up, and
Nice.
Pete published it, and then that just continued for a few years. My goal was just to get something published every year. And
Yeah.
so, it was doing more short stories. And then finally I was like, I want to try Kickstarter or crowdfunder, but I
Mhm.
needed something. So my initial idea, I had a story of a Viking shield maiden. And
Mm.
in the story, she was returning to a village, and the village was ransacked by some monster. But I made the mistake of not writing at first. I just started drawing and
Oh,
just
okay.
tried to do that, but it didn't quite pan out, obviously. So I was like, all right, let me pause this, take a step back. And one day I was looking at my bookshelf, and I have a book called Yakuza Moon, and it's an autobiography of the life of a woman named Shoko Tendo, and is the daughter of a Yakuza boss. And
Mm.
so it's just her life growing up around these very dangerous men, this very dangerous life. And she went through a lot. She comes out through the other side okay, but a cathartic experience for her at the end was to get this large traditional Japanese tattoo on her back of a courtesan. And
Mhm.
it's a really cool picture. So I was like, well, I want to kind of do a piece of art based on that, but I didn't want to draw a courtesan. So I was like, there have been female samurai. I'll draw just a female samurai. So I had her in the corner, but then I had this empty space on the paper, and I was like, okay, well, what I drew a castle, and then like a haunted swamp behind it. I was like, well, what's in that castle?
Yeah.
And that's when it was like, ooh, like what kind of movie would I want to see? I want to see a samurai, dark fantasy, creature feature,
Yeah, yeah.
haunted house story. And that's where it started. And so I initially made Red Koi to be a Kickstarter,
Mhm.
but it so happened that Pete, publisher of Alterna, he and I live relatively close together, so close to each other. And so at a comic book event, I had my portfolio open and sort of skewed towards his table, he was gonna come over and say hi, or I'd say
Yeah.
hi to him eventually. So he came over, he's like, "What's this?" I was like, "Oh, something I've been working on." He's like, "Well, maybe you send it to me." And I was like, "Yes, okay, let's do that." And so, and at the time, I think that was 2017 or 2018. It's all a blur now, but Alterna was going through crazy stuff. Like the newsprint thing was happening. I
Yeah.
think Pete was stopping the graphic novels to focus on newsprint. And so
Mhm.
there was a lot of change happening. So it was a long waiting process. It must have been
Yeah.
2018. And so, but Red Koi was in the pipeline. And
Nice.
then in between there, Red Koi wasn't going to come out till 2019. And so I ended up doing a Kickstarter for the Swan King, and
Mm.
the Swan King ended up getting picked up by Alterna later, and he's
Nice.
also made his way into the latest issue of Red Koi. So it's all
All
kind of
coming
worked.
together.
Yeah, yeah.
Well, it's awesome, and I love that story. So maybe we could kind of just dive right into it, right? You have
Yeah.
this samurai who's been gone for what, 5 years, I think, fighting a war in the South.
Yeah.
And a lot of things have taken place at home while she's away fighting
Mhm.
this war. And I don't want to give too much away, although I think you're going into what issue are you on now? 7?
So issue 7 is going to be on our August pre-order campaign, and that
Right.
campaign is going to launch June 1st.
Gotcha. Okay, perfect. And we'll get more into that too. That way, everyone knows how to go and join that campaign. But we're probably not giving away too much by getting too much into issue 1.
No, that's all right.
But yeah, is it okay with you? Because
Yeah, let's
it's a
do it. Let's
great
talk about it.
foundation. And again, I'm new to Red Koi, so I'm getting into it. And now I'm like, I already ordered all the rest of the issues. I'm just waiting for the order to
Oh,
come in.
thank you.
But as soon as they come in, I can't wait to dig in because it starts off. She returns back to a home, and the mother had passed away, her father has passed away, and here they
Mhm.
have this home that has been really managed by a couple servants
Mhm.
that have been trying to maintain it as much as possible, but obviously without their lord being there to give direction, right? It's probably not what she was expecting to return to. And right away she meets the first servant, and then like all of a sudden, like halfway through it, you start to see this other side of what's taking place there.
and it gets really interesting. And I'm like, okay, now damn it, I'm hooked. So that's when I had to buy the rest of the issues to figure out what the hell's going on. But
Awesome.
yeah, I mean, let me know if I'm leaving anything out, but that's kind of the foundation. Here you have this warrior who's been fighting, and she's gone through a lot and returning to a home that's much different than she left.
Yeah, yeah. And so the story was kind of based on, I love my favorite monster movie is Creature from the Black Lagoon. But then I also have a soft spot for like movies like Anaconda. Like I love movies about just a little boat going upstream. And so in this story, it's this is the house that her father built while she was away. So it's a house she hasn't actually been to, but it's her father's property. And as the inheritor of the family, name and clan, she has to go put all his affairs in order so that she can continue serving who is now the shogun of the samurai clans, Lord Kitagawa, and that comes in later issues. So yeah, she's going to try to maintain their family name, keep up appearances, and then she finds that this house, this place, this entire atmosphere, it's all sort of strange and deteriorating, falling apart. And that's what I wanted with the story, was just this kind of constant underlying tension building as you're kind of getting closer to the house and closer and closer, like something's not quite right, something's not quite right. And then it all snaps.
Well, that comes across for sure. And by the end of it, right, where I didn't even realize it was the last page and it says to be continued. I'm like, oh man. So I think you accomplished that and really set up, I think, really nicely for the second issue. So I think the next question is, as a writer, you obviously have your story written out, but you're also the artist. How difficult is it to manage both sides of that? Because I feel like that's, I don't know if it's right brain, left brain, but that is like two different distinct skill sets. And that, I think, dance that you have with your artist is extremely important, because obviously the words matter a lot in the story, but also the art has to tell a portion of the story that the words can't, specifically in a graphic novel or a comic book, right? You got to have that good balance between that. So how are you managing all of that? Because it's not that often that you see someone who's writer and the artist at the same time.
Yeah, and I've always been attracted to writer artist types. I love Mike Mignola. I like a lot of Sean Murphy stuff.
I mean, we were just talking about Todd McFarlane, and for many years he did both. Yeah.
And he was probably the earliest icon of that showed me that was possible. Because I knew who owned Spawn, because he said so, in all these interviews and documentaries, because he was so proud of that. And I remember being a little kid, like, you're not really supposed to care about copyright, when you're a child. But to me, I was like, I know who owns Spawn. Like, I want to have that someday. I want to have my character, but I don't want to lose it. I want it to be mine. And so for me, I guess I always think of myself as artist writer, because I've always drawn, but I've always wondered, like, what's the story behind the character? So I've always made notes and things like that. And so for me, I do try to lean as much on the art to tell the story as I can. And actually, it's when you read issue 2, I'll be curious what you think, because when I had initially sent in issue 2, it was almost completely just art. And Pete reached out. He's like, hey, we need a little something more here. I was like, oh yeah, sorry. And the funny thing was, like, it was all up there, but I hadn't said it. I thought I was leaning too heavy on the art.
He probably thought Wes was slipping, man. He's like, Wes wasn't available. What's going on here?
I know. He had those 2 pages and he did great on them. No, and so when it comes to the writing, especially with Red Koi, I found that I had the painting that I did, and I had the castle, but it wasn't I couldn't just get into writing the issues. What I really had to do was to understand, well, who is she? Why is she here? So then it's like, okay, then we have her family level. Okay, well, what is her family bound by? Is this me trying to just tell like a story set in medieval Japan, or is this something more? Like, well, I want to be outside of our world, because I want to have the freedom to bring in little frog men and spider demons and all kinds of stuff like that. So then it was like, okay, well, then there's going to be there's going to be a value system. There's going to be a moral structure. There's going to be a
Right.
religious element. There's going to be a spiritual realm around all this. There's going to be stories. And so then it just kind of kept growing. And then as I was writing it, things started coming out like, when in the last days of the long war, when the dragon Ryushin fell,
Mhm.
to the great and terrible Tiger Lord Shoki Kaigo. And I wrote all that. I'm like, who is that? And I didn't know, and
Yeah.
but I had to get as much of the story and mythology out as I
Yeah.
could before I could get to her in the house, trying
Yeah.
facing those demons and ghosts and things. And so but for me, the most important part of having the book is to make the worlds feel lived in.
Yeah.
I think you can always tell when a character has just sort of been ham-fisted into a book, and they could be anybody.
Yeah.
They could be, they don't really have a personality or an identity. And I really wanted her to have a deep connection to this world, and to be able to give you enough where you kind of sense that this place is it's instantiated, within
Yeah.
that story.
Wow. Yeah, I mean that certainly comes across too. So as far as the artwork goes, so you're artist first. As you're writing the story, are you going back and forth panel by panel, and you're doing the art and the verbiage, and then going to the next panel, or are you writing the whole story first and then coming back and matching the right panel or the art with the storyline? How do you handle that?
So I'll write the whole issue,
Uh-huh.
and a lot of times it'll change because
Yeah.
mostly I'm just trying to take myself artistically through what it looks like, and then I'll put dialogue in when I know exactly what I want them to say.
Yeah.
Um, but I need to know where the whole issue is going to be. A lot of times I'll write too much, and then I'll
Yeah.
have 2 or 3 issues worth, and then
Hmm.
I've got to try to condense those down or restructure them. But so
Yeah.
it's like you can see in the back here, I got the current page I'm working on, but then this right here, these are my thumbnails.
Oh,
And
okay.
so I'll have those thumbnails up there, and I'll constantly be changing them. Like I had a
Yeah.
page last week, and I looked up at it and I was like, no, it's not interesting enough for me to want, to draw right now. So I'll go through and I'll look at my script again, see what I need to say, and then I'll go back to the thumbnails and I'll edit it around and chop them up and mishmash them together. So it's always changing, but it's like I'll make sure I outline to myself definitive scenes.
Okay.
Like right here we find out about this X, Y, and Z factor about her family, or this thing is revealed in this
Hmm.
moment.
Yeah.
So I try to make those main moments pop, but then give myself a little wiggle room as well.
Yeah. Yeah. And the other thing too is, you talked about managing the story and not
Mm-hmm.
putting too much. Um, like I don't know how to frame this, but like how much are you trying to say in each issue? I don't know if that question makes sense, right? Because it is an ongoing series, right? So this isn't like a
Yeah,
12
yeah, it's
part
ongoing.
series, right? So because it's an ongoing series, there's probably a little bit more freedom to say, maybe I don't want to say this yet, and maybe I'll hold
Mm.
this for the next issue. I don't know how often you're doing that.
I'm realizing I've done it quite a bit. There's
Yeah.
actually a list of things that I'm like, okay, I need to start getting some more of this stuff out because I haven't gotten certain things out yet.
Right.
So like, she's in this world, but I haven't named the world yet.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
haven't provided a map. I'm giving glimpses of that. They're in
Mhm.
the east,
Yeah.
like the Swan King's kingdom is in the west. Her war was in the south. So there's a city that's revealed in the so I'll say issues 1 and 2 are like part 1. Issues 2,
Okay.
3, and 4, issues 3, 4, and 5, sorry,
Uh-huh.
are
Yeah.
part 2.
Okay.
And in part 2, you learn that there is sort of a central city hub that all the empires kind of congregate to for trade. And so
Okay.
the map is being revealed. Um,
Mm.
but those things, they need names.
Yeah.
They need
Yeah.
that revelation. Um,
So are
so
you world building as you go, or do you kind of already have the world built out and you're just revealing it over time. Or as you're writing, you're like, wow, this would be really good to add. This is a good time to bring in the West, and this is a good time to bring in the South and define that a little bit more. Like, how do you handle that as you're world building?
Well, it's funny because so I had gotten as far as this other empire, which is more of like it's based on ancient India, sort
Okay.
of like some of those cultures down there. I read
Yeah.
about a kingdom down there that I thought was fascinating, and and I have in the second part this group of hunters who
Mm.
are after Ico, after Red Koi. And
Mhm.
so I was like, oh, okay. So here we have sort of a nod to a different place, and that's interesting. But then later on, Pete had texted me one night and said, hey, what do you think about adding the Swan King to the Red Koi universe? And I
Yeah.
was like, well, now I can't stop thinking about it. And all
Yeah.
night, man, I've got my notebook, by my bed, and I'm getting up and I'm jotting down ideas. And that kind of blew open another part of the world
Yeah.
that I hadn't thought about because they were just separate characters in my mind at the time.
Yeah.
Um, but so now, with that, it's opened up a lot of other parts that
Mhm.
I'm trying to now bring together. So I
Nice.
think
Nice.
I'll want to do an issue soon that's sort of like an issue just focused on those components, those gaps. But I will say I do have the mythology, the story of the samurai people
Mhm.
down.
Yeah.
That
Yeah. Yeah.
had major events, but in this story, you could say a big theme of it is this concept of I don't know if it's like lifting the veil, like the
Mm.
veil between the material and the
Yeah.
spiritual world.
Mhm.
Um,
Yeah.
but that permeates everything. It's not like you have the samurai gods here and you have the
Right.
western gods here, and it's an entire
Mm.
other lived in place that we're going to see the connections to,
Nice.
regardless of these different geographical groups. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Yeah. No, it does, and it sounds pretty interesting as well because I don't know. I think world building in general is pretty amazing,
Mm-hmm.
but very difficult to do. But I don't know if this is your experience as you start to do it though. And like you said, you're waking up in the middle of the night, you're jotting down notes just off of what Pete said. But I think as you start to build it, I think that becomes more normal where you're like, wow, now you could add this and you could add that. I feel like world building isn't something you just sit down and do real quick and then you're done.
Yeah.
Right. I think, I mean, if you have that skill set, you're pretty
Yeah.
amazing.
No, not
And you
me.
probably already have you're probably going to have a TV show on HBO or something if you're able to do that already. But, yeah, I feel like it seems like I've never done that, but from what you're explaining, it sounds like a very normal process that as you get feedback or as you start to build, like other ideas come in that make sense. And then that could be like another branch in that tree that you're building.
Yeah, and you got to spend some time in that place. It depends
Yeah.
where in the world I am and who I'm
Hmm.
with.
Right. Good point.
And so I've got to kind of go there in my mind for a little while and ask those questions, but try to do it from the perspective of Icos people, or do that from the
Yeah.
perspective of the Swan Kings people, because I also want there to be different people believe different things, and
Sure. Yeah.
there's going to be I'm not trying to do anything in the book that's like a cultural clash, but I do want to show that
Okay.
there are different cultures and some are alien
Yeah.
to each other.
For sure.
Um,
And I think historically, we have all kinds of examples of those
oh yeah,
clashes that have taken
absolutely.
place, right? So I think it's very normal, especially like, I don't know the age that this is taking place, but my assumption is during that time, most wars were because of those kind of clashes of
Yeah.
believing in different gods or maybe a different style of warfare or trade or whatever that happens to be, right?
Yeah, and then on like a way less like philosophical take, it could be also I've just read about something really cool in history. And I'm
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
oh, I've got a character for that.
That's awesome. Yeah,
I
of
think I was
course.
reading about the Korean turtle boats. And they're
Not
these like
familiar.
they're these boats the Koreans built, I think, to withstand the Japanese invasion
Hmm.
uh, a long time ago. But they're these boats that are like wooden tops, and they like shoot arrows and fire out the sides, and they've got like a
That's
dragon on the front. I was
That
like,
sounds
looking at this, I'm
awesome.
like, this is amazing. I need this. I need this in my book and in my life. So
It's going somewhere, man. We're gonna figure out how to put that in.
sometimes it's just that simple. I'm like, oh,
Yeah,
that piece of armor looks great. I need that. But then to your point, I just finished reading for the first time Lord of the Rings. And
Yeah.
I've always loved the movies, but I never read the books. And so finally
Yeah.
I read the books and I was like, okay,
Yeah.
that is world building at a level
Oh, it's
I
crazy.
I
Incredible.
can't fathom. I'm
Yeah.
glad it exists,
Yeah.
but it was also kind of like, okay, I know what lane I'm in.
Yeah. No, that's next level. That's Token, right?
But Tolkien, yeah.
Yeah, I mean that's next level world building. I mean that's why he's lauded as one of the greatest, right? Of being able to build a world like that. Tolkien just next level.
To invent
Incredible.
a phonetically correct language.
Oh yeah.
Multiple languages.
That's
I'm
just
like,
crazy. It's crazy.
No, I'm just gonna have everyone speak English, and it's gonna be fine. No one's gonna.
It's gonna be fine. Yeah.
They'll get it. It's the common tongue. They get it.
Yeah. Well, I mean, so we have issue 7 coming June 1st. And that's part of, if you're not familiar with Alterna, like every month they have kind of a Kickstarter, and you could pay into that Kickstarter and you get kind of all the new issues that are coming up for all the different comics under the Alterna universe, right? So yours would be part of the June 1st one, correct?
Yeah. So it's a it
Or
was
Indiegogo,
seasonal.
I'm sorry.
Yeah,
It's Indiegogo.
It's Indiegogo, but then also there's an option through the Alterna site.
Yep.
You can do the same thing. Some people
Mhm.
prefer Indiegogo, some people like to go through the Alterna site. We're happy either way you want to support. It was seasonal, but I think Pete's moving to certain months, whatever that month releases are going to be.
Okay.
I'm sure if he hasn't already, he's going to go into detail about that soon. But so this will be camping that launches June 1st for the August pre-orders.
Okay, perfect. August pre-order.
And Red Koi 7 will be on there. And Red Koi 7 completes what we could call like the third arc of the story. I could actually Red Koi 6 is where the Swan King came in.
Okay.
So we had him on there, and and so the story that kind of introduces him into her world, is in issue 6, and that part's kind of concluded in issue 7, but it pivots us towards the next chapter and the next place that we're going. I kind of think of the story sometimes as just like almost like video games, or like just I kind of think of them by the environment. So it's like, the first story was my haunted house creature feature. The second part is like it's half jungle runner and half hidden temple story.
Nice.
And then this is like, where for anybody that's read the one shot of the Swan King and never got an issue 2, this kind of serves as his introduction to Red Koi, but also as an issue 2. So we go into sort of a medieval vampire story.
Nice.
Something kind of like that. And I don't know, I've got interests that are in some ways very particular, but then also kind of general. I just want to draw these characters in all kinds of different places, and whatever environment they're in kind of gives the flavor to that issue or that arc. Trying to move more towards, I think Wes talked about this, more towards episodic storytelling.
Right. Yeah.
So I'm trying to get better about doing, rather than maybe 2 issues to tell an episode, I'm going to try and get better about 1 issue for a complete episode, even though it's moving the overall story forward. Just so a reader can get an issue, be like, oh, cool, I know how that one ends. We'll get ready for the next one.
Yeah. No, that's amazing. Let's go back into your history, if that's okay, a little bit.
Sure.
What I would love to kind of talk about is that maybe you don't know your first comic book, but what was the entrance into comic books to begin with? Like you said, it goes back pretty far, right? You started at a young age.
Oh yeah, ever since I could hold a pencil, I was drawing. I have hazy memories. I think it was like a deal where if you got this certain kind of Pop-Tart, they had a little mini Marvel comic book in it.
Oh, how
And I
cool.
think it was like Hulk and
Yeah.
Captain America. Yeah, I liked the Marvel characters when I was really little, like especially Wolverine, X-Men. I loved the
Oh,
big
yeah.
primary colors and things.
Mm.
But that was like my first one. Like, I'm like, oh, cool. And I had this. I was like, who are these people, these characters? I want to
Yeah.
learn how to draw them. And
Yeah.
then, and I always loved Hulk and Captain America. Always had a soft spot for Captain America, especially. But
Yep.
you know, it's, I think a lot of especially little boys have this experience. You see that Wolverine for the
Yeah.
first time, and you're like,
Yeah. It changes
this is
everything.
this is the greatest thing that's ever been made.
It's like the
It's
most violent thing that I could have experienced at that time. And it wasn't violent at all, but in my
no.
mind, it was like next level. Like,
Oh yeah,
oh my gosh, she's got claws that are serrated and
like
they
a
can go
foot
through
long.
trees.
He's so angry about everything.
Yeah.
It's great, especially like you know that Art Adams style, like
Yeah.
just big,
Yeah.
muscly, detailed
Yeah.
Wolverine, and that kind of led me into the X-Men, and I always loved the X-Men, Gambit, all
Yeah.
those. So that was kind of the start, and I think it was like a oh, I talked to Fabrizio Aiello, who's done Horace H. Hoover for Alterna, and
Mm.
he knew what it was. It was Sears had a deal. Sears department store had a deal where if like you'd get a box of 50 comics. I think one
Oh,
year some family had gotten me this box of comics,
oh,
and I
cool.
still have some of them. It's all
Oh.
random stuff that you look through your collection, you're like, where did this come from? Like I don't know. But that kind of started it. I didn't
Yeah.
have subscriptions though until I was much older, and
Yeah.
but like in high school, it's just we didn't have a place that was close enough. But I
Yeah.
was like, it was X-Men, um, Swan was a big one for a long time, and then Hellboy was huge for me.
Oh, yeah.
Hellboy was huge because I loved superheroes, but um, you know, I had a mind that I liked all different types of stories, always kind of dark and kind of creepy. There's always a hero, there's always a villain. But Hellboy was something weird and something
Yeah.
different. And I was like, oh, I didn't know you could do that,
Yeah.
And so that was a big one. Hellboy, that led to the Goon, that
Yeah.
led to
Oh, the goon. I
Scott.
love the goon, man.
Goon is so good.
So good.
And that was one where I was like, now I'm not a comedy writer, but
Yeah, yeah.
it gave me an appreciation for funny books,
Absolutely. Yeah.
real funny
Oh,
stuff.
yeah, I mean, it's so violent, so funny, relatable in a weird way. It
Yep.
just everything about it is just I love the goon.
It's yeah, no, that was Goon was an obsession for a while. Um and Scott Morse was a big one for a
Yep.
while. He was a writer artist. I love his
Yep.
graphic novels. Also emailed him once or twice, and he's a real sweet guy. But he
Nice.
was really inspirational, especially with his attitude, where he's just like, because he is an animator, and he's always like,
Yeah.
look, it doesn't matter what your day job is. Comics are so doable because they're cheap. He's like,
Yeah.
if you can draw and you
Yeah.
can write, he's like, you can make a comic, and you
Mhm.
need to do something for yourself if you're a creative person, because if not, you're gonna lose your mind. And this is a guy who's making cartoons,
Yeah.
and he's still like, I need to have my own thing out there. So
Yeah.
that kind of was started me down the indie, train for a long time.
Yeah.
And that's kind of the path I've followed for a while. There's some
Mhm.
stuff from the big two that's gotten my attention over the years. I really loved
Sure.
Scott Snyder's
Yeah.
Court of Owls run. That was just
Oh,
I
so
just didn't
good.
know you could I didn't know you could create a new villain in Batman and have it be cool.
Incredible.
And
No, it
it
was
was very cool.
it's probably one of there's a couple Batman ones, but that has got to be at top of the list. Yeah, Scott
Plus
Snyder and
Greg Capullo on
Capullo
pencils,
on
man. I
art.
mean,
One of my
come
favorite
on.
artists of all time.
Same.
Just incredible, incredible.
I wanted to be Greg Capullo for the longest time.
Don't we all?
I know. I was at New York City Comic Con years ago. Few years ago. I managed to go like 4 years in a row, and I'm walking through the sea of people, and all of a sudden Greg Capullo's in front of me.
Oh
And
wow.
he's about like he's an average sized height, but he's just a house.
Oh,
And
he's
he's
stocky.
just
Yeah.
like a neck with shoulders, and all of a
Yeah.
sudden he's just there, and I just hand out like, love your work, man. He's like, thanks, brother. And he like handshake, and we keep walking. I'm like, this is awesome. This is awesome. It was
Nah, he is
amazing.
so talented. It's just unbelievable how
Yeah.
talented that guy is.
And
Yeah.
his videos early on, like when I was saying I was putting myself through the art school, he's got tons of material on YouTube just
Yeah.
telling people like, I read these books, I did these things, do this, do that, put yourself in this position while you're, trying to get better and take and put the time in here. He and a few other people like through YouTube kept me company and
Yeah.
educated me as I was going through.
That's awesome. That's awesome. So obviously Greg Capullo's at the top of your list of artists that have had an effect on you. What other artists can you kind of point to and say that person had an effect on me and wanting to be a comic book artist?
Definitely Mike Mignola.
Mm-hmm.
Definitely Akira Toriyama and Dragon Ball Z. I
Yeah,
love
yeah,
I was not big on manga growing up, but Toriyama stuff was always attractive to me. It
yeah,
always stood out. It was always interesting to look at. His
yeah.
characters were always just so much fun. So I've got so much love for Toriyama. Um, Sean Murphy's stuff was huge for
Mm,
me for a long
yeah,
time. I think he's another one in that Capullo class where he was like everyone was kind of like, oh yeah, this is something different and something very cool.
yeah, yeah.
Trying to think. Craig Thompson was actually one.
Mm,
He did that. I got into a little slice of life stuff, and it
mm-hmm.
was his work, like blankets.
Yeah.
That was pretty big, and he's one that really introduced me to the idea of brushwork.
Oh,
Because I
okay.
was always kind of like, I'll be a nib guy or a micron guy, but
Yeah,
he's the one that really kind of brought up the brush as an option, and I love using the brush.
yeah, yeah,
You can
yeah.
see like my scrap paper over there
Yeah,
from
yeah.
brushwork.
That's
Um,
awesome. That's awesome.
yeah.
One of the other artists that I've really come to love, and mainly because it's probably my favorite superhero comic, is Invincible, Ryan Ottley.
Oh
I don't,
yeah,
he has a very unique style.
yeah.
Anytime he does art, it's him by just looking
Hmm.
at it. But I really enjoy him, and his work on the Hulk recently has been pretty amazing as well.
Oh cool. I haven't seen that, but I will check
Hmm.
that out.
Yeah, check it out. In fact, the last I think 5 issues, the writer of the Hulk, I'm losing who it was, but he moved on to another book, and Ryan Ottley, like you, then was doing the art and he was doing the writing. And I think, if I'm not mistaken, it was his first kind of forte into writing, and in addition to art, and he did really good. I mean, he's such an
Good for
amazing artist.
him.
But I love Invincible. That's like one of my favorite comic books of all time. I don't
Well,
know if you've read Invincible,
I
from
haven't.
Image,
No.
Robert Kirkman, who did Walking Dead. You gotta, it is, I don't know how to explain it. It starts off and you feel like it's a Spider-Man kind of story, young superhero, right? Doesn't know he has powers, knows he's going to get powers because his dad has powers, and then his powers come in. I mean, it's kind of nice, right? It's very Spider-Man-ish at the very
Sure.
beginning, and then it gets ultraviolet very quickly, and it gets crazy, and it's world building as well.
Cool.
And I think they had 144 issues, and then Robert kind of closed that down as
Hmm.
part of his history. Now, obviously, I don't think he ever has to work again, Robert
No,
Kirkman.
probably not.
Yeah, he's made a lot of money off of Walking Dead, and now Skybound is exploding. But anyways, Ryan was the artist for a lot of that, and he's just really good.
Well, his stuff always stands out. I
Yeah.
haven't read Invincible, but I mean it always pops out at me when I'm
Hmm.
there. I mean, I'll always pick one up and kind of flip through and
Yeah,
take a
yeah,
look.
yeah, yeah. Well, that's awesome. So here you have this history of comics at a very young age. You've been drawing for a very long time. You have Swan King as a one
Mhm.
shot, Red Koi. What other works that maybe I'm not familiar with have you done? Or is there other things that maybe you're working on? Maybe you can't share too much, but is there other comics that you kind of have in your back pocket as well, or storylines that could be a comic?
So I've had a bunch of short stories published through Alterna.
Okay,
And so I could actually just so a
that'd
lot
be
of
awesome. Yeah.
the graphic novel stuff
Mm-hmm.
has they're not putting those out anymore, but a lot of
Yeah.
those stories have been collected into these. It came out on Wednesdays.
Oh yeah,
These are short story anthology comics, and so all of these, all of my short stories that were published in years past were picked up in these, including, and I'll just kind of point one out in particular.
Sure.
This story was called The Long Path.
Oh, okay.
And this is actually ties into the Red Koi universe.
Oh, really?
So I talk about, the dark and terrible Tiger Lord Shoki Kaigo.
Yeah. Oh,
and
there
this
he
is
is.
a bit of his story.
Oh, he looks awesome too.
Yeah, and so this one, this was one where I had an idea. It was a short story I kind of wanted to put on paper.
That's cool.
And and I didn't know what would come of it, but it's a window into the world as well. And then I've got my first story in I won't do this all to the entire time. My first
No, it's
story,
okay. I mean, we want to get to know you, and this is awesome, man.
Hercules' trial against the Nemean
That's the one.
lion.
Yeah. And that's in that same book. What was it called?
That-
Wednesday?
That's in this is it came out on a
Yes.
Wednesday.
It came out on a so
This is number
so I
12.
seen that on the website, that comic. And so what it is it's just a collection of short stories every
Yep.
single issue.
Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah, they're all short stories. And then the last
I'm wondering
one,
when you come out with a trade of like your first 10 issues or something like that, if you can't add some of those short stories maybe at the beginning that do tie into Red Koi, that way people who can no longer get their hands on it can at least have that portion of the story as part of their. I'm obviously saying it's something you've already done, maybe.
Well, I'd like to do that. What Pete started to do was the Alterna Giants.
Yes.
And so this
Those are
is
awesome.
issues 1 and 2. But what I wanted to throw in here for people who'd already bought those issues was this this backstory that introduces you to Lord Kitagawa. I don't know how well you could see that.
Yeah,
but so this is like a prequel story that shows you what sent Aiko out from the capital. To this is where she asked permission to go to put her father's affairs in order.
Yeah.
And where she's given that permission, but then you kind of see who it is that's now in charge of the samurai, and it's just this monstrous behemoth, kind of mechanized looking being.
He's huge. He takes up the whole panel.
yeah, and that's what I wanted. I was like, I don't know. It's funny because you have these ideas sometimes where it's like, I'm not sure why he's gonna be this way, but he's gonna be just obnoxiously big. Something's going on beneath all that armor. We'll I've got to figure out what that is. And then the last story I had it came out on a Wednesday. I had a gangster story. It's like I managed to fit Irish gangsters, bikers, and triads into one story. And
I feel like maybe Goon had a little bit of influence, maybe. Yeah.
Oh yeah. I was like, oh man, I didn't know you could do that.
Yeah, exactly.
Zombies and gangsters in the same books.
Yeah, sold, man. That was so good.
It was short stories for a long time. Right now, I mean, the only thing I'm working on is Red Koi.
I mean, you're doing a lot of world building, so I feel like there's a lot of doors that haven't been opened yet to that story. So it makes sense that you would focus there. I just want to make sure for our audience that we're covering everything that you've touched. That way, if they want to dig into it, they have that ability to do so.
In issue 7, I'm glad you mentioned that, because in issue 7, we open yet another door.
Nice.
To the north.
Sweet.
And then we're going to be introduced to more of like a Viking Norse kind of culture. Sweet. And they're going to play a role as well. And I nod to them in some of the in one of the previous Red Koi issues.
Okay.
Where you realize that they have been pushing the boundaries of another empire, and the samurai are being called to help support this empire, and Aiko has got a role to play in that she's not too happy about. So
yeah, that's awesome, man.
But the issue and I posted it online, but there's this just this big behemoth, all the best Viking stereotypes that
Oh, for sure.
you
Have to.
you read an article and people are like, Vikings weren't really a top. It's like, no, just let me have my thing. Come on.
Don't
It's
ruin
huge.
this for me.
I
I
know
want big horns coming off the helmet. I don't care if that really wasn't part of it.
That's right. His axe looks like you couldn't even lift it like an inch. That's how obnoxious it is. So
exactly.
that's the world I'm playing in. That's the world we're getting into after issue 7.
I can't wait for you to have, northeast, southwest, and then a map that kind of shows what that world looks like with all these different,
is this piece of paper right here. That's my draft for a map.
Nice.
Right there. It's slightly outlined. We got to get it done though.
I'm a very visual learner. And so a map is going to really help me understand what's going on a lot more.
Well, now I got to do it, Tommy.
Yeah, you got to.
Can't let
because
you down.
I'm so important to how you finish your comic, man. You got
absolutely, absolutely.
Oh yeah, no, that's awesome, man. Man, Tyler, I cannot wait for my. It says it's been shipped, so I'm just waiting for the shipment of the rest of Red Koi to show up. But I cannot wait to get into all the way up to issue 6, and I'll definitely be part of that 7 buy because man,
awesome. Thank you.
I'm enjoying it, and I want to take the ride with you, my friend. This is awesome, man.
Thank you very much. Thank you for reading, and I'm definitely curious what you think. I want to get your reaction because there's certainly an evolution as it's going. Because I started this. It's my first long form work after doing short stories. But like the arts continue to evolve, the story is continuing to evolve. So I always tell readers, that I meet at shows or please tell me what you think. I want to know. And I'm always interested and really appreciate you, signing up for the campaign as well. It's
absolutely. I mean, I'm such a big fan of Alterna, man. I love the business model. I love the access that almost anybody who loves comics has with Alterna. It's so cheap. Even the shipping is like everything about it is affordable, and you almost feel like you need to support it just because of the price point, all this stuff. But then you get into it, man. I mean, Wes's Unit 44, your Red Koi. I mean, Can't Kill Kate. I had a blast with that comic book. Like it's amazing the level of professionalism that takes place with Alterna. And that's why I had to reach out to Pete and said, Pete, man, you're doing something right that I think a lot of people could learn from because you're pumping out a lot of really amazing stuff. And Red Koi is definitely part of that. So congratulations on your success. If people want to follow you, how do they do that? I mean, are you on Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, all those things, or?
I stick mostly to Twitter and Instagram. It's just at Tyler Wentland. Whenever you get on there, I'll be the one that has this little guy as my avatar.
Yep.
And I try to post something every day. Little insights to the book and stuff like that. And then tylerwentland.com, just my name.com is my website. And you can go there. I've got my own site store if you want signed issues. I've got, a bunch of character, bios on there, and maybe it'd be worth checking out. Then if anybody reads or has questions about the book or just wants to say hi, I love hearing from readers and curious people. So.
Very good. And as far as trade shows, is there any coming up where you'll be attending?
I don't have anything on the schedule. I just did a free comic book day at my local shop, though.
Nice.
And that was my first event since last year. I got to, I think it was Plastic City Con in Massachusetts down here. But it was great. It's fun, meet new people, and free comic book day is always exciting. People are always happy to come out and say hi. So
nice. Well, Tyler, I can't tell you how much I appreciate you coming on. I would love to do this again.
Absolutely.
Timing's everything. So you let me know if you have some big news. I would love to have you back to share that news with everybody. But we're here for you. We want to see the success of Red Koi and the worlds that you're building around that. And if you haven't read Red Koi, I'm telling you, it's for the price, for the story, you're not going to get a better deal than going to Alterna Comics, or you could go to tylerwentland.com and you could get all of your Red Koi information from there. But please support our indie creators. One last thing I want to talk about, and I try to talk about this a little bit with everybody that I have on the show. What is your sense of the current state of comic books today?
I feel like I'm so in my own world.
Yeah,
I may not have a good sense of that. Most of what I pay attention to is indie.
Yeah. So why
of
don't we reframe the question? What is your sense of indie today and the strength of indie?
I think it's the place to be. You know, I mean, people are struggling sometimes with the big two,
Sure.
and they seem
Yeah.
like they're struggling to kind of find what they're trying to do.
Yeah.
There's always going to be something for those characters. People are
Sure.
always going to love those foundational. I love those characters.
I do too. Yeah, absolutely.
But if people aren't, if some people are feeling like they're not finding their footing with those characters, you know, there's a way to go in terms of indie, and people are doing amazing things. You know, Kickstarter, Indiegogo have broken the door open in so many ways. There's so much cool stuff to check out, and then a lot of publishers are getting in on that too. So you'll find like this is just maybe a fun example, but I'm a big Mike Turner fan. I loved Michael Turner, you know, as so many of us did. And when Aspen put out the big Michael Turner collection a few years ago, like I think it was like his Aspen work, Soulfire, all of his stuff in a big they crowdfunded it.
Yeah.
And I can't remember how much money they raised in like one day, because those of us who were Mike Turner fans from back in the day were like, yes, absolutely. You know, so I think that's just provided a place for smaller comic companies to find a way to put their stuff out there. But even those of us who, you know, people who don't have a company behind them, there's just that room. So for me, I think indie is the place where a lot of great stuff is coming along. I just read this book the other day. It's called All Eight Eyes.
Oh yeah,
and it's like
I have it right here. Yeah,
it's sweet, man. I was reading that. I'm like, dude, this is exactly what I wanted. Like weird spider creatures have always been hunting people. Yes, of course, that's true.
It makes perfect sense.
Yeah, why not? But I was like, I love this, and there's nowhere else it could be done than indie comics. So
agree. Yeah. Well, Tyler, thank you for joining the show today. We were really happy to have you. And man, until next time, we wish you the very best, my friend.
Thanks, Tommy. Appreciate it.
All right. Thank you. Have a good one.
You too.
Bye.